Hey guys, I'm Michael Parker, host of Joint Venture. This is our very first episode. We're glad you're with us. In this show, our intention is going to be to show you the ins and outs of this new legal cannabis economy and how maybe you can be part of it. But one of the first things that I want to talk about, because it seems to be at the core, and that's the banking issue. I'm joined in the studio today by Barbara Southworth. She is a provider of surety bonds and insurance to cannabis-related companies. She's also the host of the weekly Marijuana State Report. Barbara, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I've been listening to your show, thoroughly enjoy it. You've got an episode tomorrow, I believe. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because at the core of the promise of the legal cannabis economy, we have this issue. And for those who've never been to a dispensary, you may be surprised to find out you can't use a credit card. You don't use a debit card. Not only that, there are statistics that say that there's up to 70 to 80% of these cannabis companies that don't have bank accounts. Is that true?
Yes, that's probably true. Though it's the landscape of that is changing. There, in each state, I sell nationally, so I have experience in every state that has made legalized cannabis, whether it's for medical marijuana or adding to that recreational or adult use, depending on your terms.
Right.
But at any rate, each state has found a way to provide some banking. And it's always been through a state chartered bank, so credit unions, community banks, those kind of institutions are the ones that have stepped up, and oftentimes at the request of a governor to say, could you please step up. They still have to have great compliance reporting to FinCEN, which you probably don't know who that is, but they're the organization, the federal organization that tracks illegal drug trafficking money. Mm-hmm. So the banks have to report every transaction to FinCEN because from a federal perspective, it's illegal. From a state perspective, it is not. So here in California, they've made some great strides. There are a number of community banks that are offering accounts. They really carefully examine and do background checks on a company that wants to bank with them. They don't take any comer. You have to really be operating in a fully compliant world and know how to operate in that. Banks have been operating in a fully compliant world for a very long time, especially after the collapse of the mortgage companies.
2008.
Right. So they've been highly regulated, and so they need to be assured that the company they're going to take deposits from is comfortable in a highly regulated environment.
I want to walk through all the nuances of this. You mentioned FinCEN, but also there was this thing called the Cole Memorandum in 2013, and that seemed like a beginning to try to find an answer, but that wasn't the answer either. So explain what that was and why it didn't work.
The Cole Memo was written during the Obama era, and basically it was an attempt through a memorandum to assure the banks that if they were taking money from legal marijuana businesses, that they wouldn't be prosecuted. It really didn't accomplish that, but what it did do is it also took away from the Justice Department any funds that they might use to try and pursue legal cannabis businesses in the states where it was legalized. So it accomplished one part, which was fabulous. The Justice Department isn't allowed to spend any money going after cannabis businesses in states where it's legal. But it did not solve the banking issue.
And am I understanding this correctly, that the banks still, it was an onerous situation because they would have had to create documentation for every single transaction?
They still do. Yeah, they still do.
So let me go in further. When we say every single transaction, because I'm reading this in the press and I want to make sure I understand this, and for our audience as well, A transaction, is that a deposit or every single transaction that a person makes at the dispensary? Which one is it?
It's a combination, and it's not as
That's a
onerous.
huge number.
No, it's not as onerous as you might think,
Okay.
because each state is requiring the cannabis companies, whether they're a distributor or a manufacturer or a dispensary or a grow, every single one of these operations have to participate in a data gathering software program that each state has elected to implement. And so they're tracking already from seed to sale, the movement of money and the movement of product through every single one of those organizations. So it's not like they have to do something in addition, meaning the dispensary, for example. They already are reporting every single transaction.
I meant the bank.
To the bank, they have different reporting data structures. So the problem has been converting what they've already got, meaning the dispensary or the manufacturer, converting that information from their systems and getting it into the banking system effectively and smoothly, so it doesn't cost the bank a whole lot of money.
Sure.
In order to process these deposits. And that's where the hiccup has always been, aside from the fact that it's federally illegal. And so the federal banks, the banks that have national charters rather than state charters, they are always concerned that their banking licenses, if you will be revoked if they participate. That's why you're not seeing Chase or Citibank or any of these nationally recognized banks. They're just not participating.
Yeah, because people
reason.
from Wells Fargo, from JP Morgan Chase, I believe,
Yeah.
Citibank, they've all been on the record saying, listen, we're not really interested at this point.
Exactly.
And
But it's been a real boon for the community banks. 'Cause
Yes.
Their deposits have gone up astronomically.
yeah, you mentioned credit unions. That has been a part of the financial services industry that has stepped up.
Yes.
Okay, so if I go into a dispensary, I really have no alternative than to pay cash.
Yeah, some of them are using other little devices, which aren't.
Bitcoin, is that what you?
Yeah, they're not mainstream solutions like Bitcoin. PayPal won't take the money either.
Really?
Yeah, they don't want to be participating in it either.
Okay, so these deposits can't be federally insured is another issue, is that right? FDIC insured?
Yeah, unless somehow the bank has a state charter, but the volume of money is so large it wouldn't have been covered anyway. Your standard insurance at a bank is $100,000.
Right.
These guys they're processing millions of dollars. These operations are not small. They're not mom and pop operations. There's a few, but mostly they're not mom and pop. So it would have already exceeded the FDIC insurance requirements anyway.
You mentioned earlier a state bank, and I believe that John Chiang, who's our treasurer, is talking about this very thing. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
What do you think the chances are of that happening?
It already is happening.
Oh, it is happening.
Yeah. I did an interview, you might want to listen. I did an interview last week that's going to be airing this week with Todd Claparis. He's the CEO of a distribution company here in California. And for those of you who don't know this, the way they set up distributors in California is unlike the way they did it in any other state.
John Chiang, the state treasurer, is trying to create a state bank, as you mentioned. Tell me about that.
Well, he faces a tremendous amount of difficulty. Anybody can start a bank. But a bank, even a state bank, ultimately has to connect into the financial network. And supposedly, you have to have some history before you're going to be allowed to connect into the financial network, which is a national Federal Reserve issue. These banks that I was telling you about are already participants in the Federal Reserve.
Right.
So in some ways, they're an easier solution. But from John Chiang's position. The reason they're looking at maybe a state bank is it's not just the dispensaries that have a problem with moving cash into the banking system because it's cannabis money. The state too has the same problem. So that's why John Chiang is really in the midst of this, trying to solve the state problem of cannabis money. They don't want buckets of cash coming to them and then having to go through the reporting and all of that to the banking institution. So it's a very complicated problem that they're trying to solve, and they've got some very smart people looking at it, and hopefully they'll come up with a creative solution that works.
Well, I'm sure they will. As my dad always said, it's too much money to ignore. Let's go back to the taxation question. You're saying that right now the distributors are remitting the tax back to the state.
Correct.
That doesn't seem like the most efficient way to do it, but is that, are we getting all the tax back that we can through this method?
Yes, I
Okay.
think we are. And there's, again, back to the seed to sale tracking system. There's nothing that's going to happen if you're a legal entity. There's nothing that's going to happen that's going to divert that money. If the state is very concerned of the fact that we've been in California, had cannabis growing here for almost 20 years in a very non-regulated manner.
Yes.
So switching to a regulated system is difficult, and it's difficult on all levels. But these companies and families that have been growing cannabis for 20 or 3 generations, they aren't adjusting well to a highly
Regulated system.
regulated system. And so their big fear is, and they don't really know how to address it, is how are these people going to be converted, or are they going to remain in the gray market or the black market? So they've got a whole bunch of problems they're trying to solve. It's unlike the other states. Illinois, Florida, none of these states had an active cannabis market. Mm-hmm. California has had it for like 20 years.
Right.
So they've got a lot of more mature problems to solve in California, also because it's massive.
Right, it's a more nuanced problem, and it's existing customer base and existing farming base that's been doing it. Okay, I get that. And I am optimistic that things are going to work out. I voted for Prop 64 because the state needs money, and this crop is going to grow regardless. So I think we should definitely be receiving that money, and that was one of the reasons I was for it. So that was one of the main things that I wanted to cover with you, because the banking issue seems to me to be the core thing. I am optimistic they'll work it out.
I am too. Like I say, I've seen, temporary solutions that I think are workable. It's just that not everybody is going to be able to participate, because even those state banks are requiring high compliance, rigorous reporting, and unless the company is prepared to do that, they won't take their money.
Well, this all makes sense. Barbara, thank you for coming on the show. We're going to do one more episode and talk about some more things, because you know so much and I'm learning a lot and I'm enjoying your presence. My name is Michael Parker. This is Joint Venture. I hope you're going to watch more of the show. If you dig what we're doing here, tell your friends, send them the link, have them send it on to their friends. Until next time, I'm out.